In this video I would like to talk about the extraterrestrial origins of humanity, the Pentagon revelations about UFOs and the hidden truths behind the Great Reset, and also of planet Mallona, the function of good and evil, and the controversial theories about the reptilians. Since the beginning of time, extraterrestrials have been manifesting on Earth. There have been testimonies of these encounters all over the world. So are we talking about reality, conspiracy, or imagination? The amount of established and documented facts leave no room for doubt. However, a policy of misdirection and insidious confusion of evidence wants to cast a shadow on what is now evident to many. In May 2020, Prince Charles of Wales and Klaus Schwab, director of the World Economic Forum, presented a project called Great Reset, which aimed to rebuild sustainably the world economy after the COVID-19 pandemic. In this scenario, the UFO Revelation Project comes to completion, starting from the Pentagon in December 2017. In the early months of 2021, the US Military Command releases a series of information, photographs, and videos of great importance. American politicians then begin to talk about the need to enact laws on the UFO threat. On May 2021, former President Barack Obama said, "What is true is that there is footage and records of objects in the skies that we don't know exactly what they are. So I think that people still take seriously trying to investigate and figure out what that is." Obama's comments added to the growing legitimacy of the reports of the unidentified phenomenon and the government awareness of them at high levels. On May 2021, on the occasion of International Symposium of Philosophy, Monsignor Carlo Maria Vigano, talking about the Great Reset, also referred to the announced revelations of the Pentagon on UFOs. An alien attack on which already some of our friends begin to open the famous Overton window. What more than extraterrestrials can be considered invisible enemy? To fuel collective fear after decades of films in which we show invasions of creators from space. In his speech, the High Prelate, who hit the headlines for his positions of non-alignment with the Vatican, described the modus operandi of the geniuses, ideators of the Great Reset. First, dress up with admissible ideals their designs. Second, create an external enemy or an emergency that all of the usual solutions that the elite had already prepared and planned. Third, provide the apparent solutions which permit the implementations of those reforms. The same affects the personal freedoms of the citizen, and in ordinary times they would be considered unacceptable. All this to conduct an internal split in society, creating new enemies of the people and distracting them from the real architects of the conflict. It is worth mentioning here the fascinating theory of the Overton window, the mechanism of persuasion and manipulation of the masses, the path and the stages through which every idea, although absurd and wild, can find its own window of opportunity. Any idea, if skillfully and progressively channeled into the media and public opinion circuit, can become part of the mainstream. That is the widespread dominant thought. Unacceptable behavior yesterday, today can be considered normal. Tomorrow will be encouraged, and the day after tomorrow will become a rule, all without apparent forcing. After all, it is the typical partner of dictatorship. Entire people, not only and not always as a result of violent pressure, at a certain point find themselves all thinking in the same way, and sharing supinely lifestyle previously not even imaginable, to finally find themselves locked in a cave of captivity as in the fairy tale of Pied Piper. And yet it happened, and it happens. Indeed, in the era of internet and artificial intelligence, which at the time of Overton was just in its infancy, new boundless horizons have opened up where scenarios seem to materialize worthy of the dystopian novel of Orwell and Benson, dominated by invisible big brothers and masters of the world. To stay on topic, Noam Chomsky, a contemporary anarchist and philosopher, had already declined in sociological terms the so-called boiling frog syndrome, inspired by the results of an old scientific experiment of the 19th century. If we look at what has been happening in our society for several decades, many things that would have horrified us 20, 30 or 40 years ago gradually become trivial, sweetened, and today leave the vast majority decidedly indifferent. The worst attacks on individual freedoms, on the dignity of the person, on the integrity of nature, on the beauty and happiness of living, carried out in the name of science, slowly and inexorably became acceptable, and all with the connivance of the ignorant or naive victims. The same happens to the boiled frog, cooked to perfection while wallowing quietly in his increasingly lukewarm water. David Icke is the author of the conspiracy theory about the reptilians. Much of the theory's popularity comes from Icke's interpretation of Gnostic texts, such as the Nag Hammadi, as well as biblical apocrypha like the Dead Sea Scrolls. He says he believes these texts contain evidence that certain higher vibrational beings of frequency, known as archons, appeared on Earth as humans, masking their true reptilian form. These archontic forces are undoubtedly evil, intent on enslaving humanity for their own selfish reasons, also known to use their most infamous arm of clandestine influence. The Illuminati, these famous reptilian shapeshifters, form a psychopathic ruling class that pulls the strings in all of the world financial and political power structures. And it is not hard to sympathize with Icke's belief. The decisions made by politicians, bankers, and the global elite are often selfish, detrimental to the environment, and subversive to the betterment of society at large. 3 signs of psychopathy. But are they really reptilians? Of course, we all have a reptilian brain, that part of us responsible for behaviors such as aggression, dominance, and territoriality, which was a nickname given to the basal ganglia by neuroscientist Paul MacLean when he wanted to compare our instinctual actions to those of reptiles. But it seems like the reptilians Icke describes are even more sneaky and capable of more cerebral thought. Accordingly to Icke's theories, there are 2 types of these famous reptilians: hybrids and full-bloods. The worst, most influential political figures, including the Queen of England, President Bush, and others, are of the hybrid ilk. Icke typically sticks to institutions and political entities, especially those with nefarious histories like the CIA, the Bilderberg Group, and the Trilateral Commission. In one of his most renowned titles, The Biggest Secret, Icke meticulously charts the blood sign of a family called the Merovingian, a central connection of French nobility that links ancient Egyptian pharaohs and Roman emperors to the British royal family, US presidents, and nearly every other influential political figure of the last few centuries. Icke says there is mention in the Nag Hammadi of not just reptilians but also the Greys, commonly reported as one of the less than friendly alien species humans encounter. These two are manifestations of the negative archontic form. Ike also points to the Old Testament, in which the Nephilim, the fallen ones, fit into his theory of a descendant race infiltrating humanity. Some translations interpret the Nephilim as giants and others as fallen angels, but in both cases they interbreed with humans. Ike says these are the reptilians, and the pictures of them can be seen throughout disparate religions and cultures in antiquity, worshipped as god or demigods like the Nephilim. In ancient Sumer, there is a literal statue of a reptilian goddess cradling his offspring. Ancient Egypt has a Pep, the serpent deity that embodies chaos and opposite light. In Mesoamerican culture, there was Quetzalcoatl or Kukul clan, the flying feathered reptile god who created the cosmos. Indian religions, including Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism, speaks of the Naga, a human snake hybrid demigod that are potentially dangerous to humans. Were they, the half-blooded reptilians, Ike warns us of today? Whether you ascribe to Ike's rather fantastical theory, his sentiment and the foundation of his histrionics stem from a genuine concern for humanity, and the oppression he sees from an elite class, the 1%. This anxiety is shared by a lot of people in the world, particularly in this day and age, and for that it is difficult to completely dismiss Ike's ideas, reptilian, aliens, or otherwise. But there are other theories about the function of good and evil and the real nature of the reptilians. The famous contactee Eugenio Siragusa talked about the nature of Lucifer and the function of good and evil. Accordingly to him, there has been a specific point in time when occurred the distortion of the humanity of the earth. 100 million years ago, all the planets occupied orbits other than those currently known, and there was another planet no longer present today called Mallona or Lucifer. At the time, the sun of the planet Mallona exploded due to a rebellion to the universal law and an incorrect use of the nuclear science. It was then that began the fierce struggle between Lucifer and the Christ. The divine intelligence exiled part of the inhabitants of Mallona on the planet Earth. Thus there was a coupling between the beings of the planet Mallona and the terrestrial woman, which led to the perpetuations of the genetics of the planet Mallona that is of a certain scientific value but unfortunately lacking in spiritual qualities, the lineage of Cain, the brother who kills the brother. From that time, the evolution of the terrestrial man was distorted because polluted by an aggressive gene, which led to the situation that we are living nowadays. Pier Giorgio Caria, international researcher of frontier science, whose mentor was Eugenio Siragusa, furtherly developed this theory. God has got his own attributes: omnipresence, omnipotence, and omniscience. For his attributes, he is invincible, so he cannot have an enemy. God created this project to select among humanity those faithful to the law. Let them grow. When they have grown and matured, there will be no more doubt between what will we eat and what we eat. We are the enemies of God when we break the law. Thus, the function of the negative beings, which a certain current defines as reptilians rather than Elohim, is tempting us and make the selection between the wheat and the weeds. They have power over us and make war with each other to conquer us. We are the object of the dispute when we polarize on positive or negative frequencies. So the real function of the angel or the devil is temptation. Reptilians are divided into two categories. There is Lucifer and his fallen angels, who were exiled to Earth because they destroyed their planet with the nuclear power and are trying to do it again here. They lost their bodies because the race became extinct, but before that they hybridized with the Earthlings, leaving their crazy son Cain behind. So the reptilians, as well as us, come from the dinosaur. The embryos at the origin are all very similar. In fact, most small strings of DNA are enough to create the fields. We come from the dinosaur and not from the monkey because the planet Earth in ancient times had manifested the dinosaur that had occupied all the biological niches, the water, the earth, and the sky. The Creator chose the dinosaur, the most suitable animal, not to make the man, but to create our biological container. Then we have the soul, and our body changes accordingly to the evolution of our field. If we take on an ethical life, we rise to the vibrational frequency of the spirit. Instead, the reptilian is the man who is losing the soul, the ego sum, and consequently his humanity and solidarity. He begins to manifest the instinct of the primordial beast from which we descend, the aquatic terrestrial dinosaur, using the reptile instinct in this three-dimensional experience. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and more videos will come on this same channel.